I want to welcome everybody to the Daily Cheat Sheet here with the OGs, Golan and the Dude. Obviously, it was one hell of a weekend, and the world is, or America is pretty much in chaos over 15 seconds. When you look at the events that happened in Minnesota, that's how long pretty much it occurred. And you have every commentator, every internet sleuth, dissecting every frame of that video for 3 hours or 10 hours or 15 hours over 15 seconds of a person that was an agitator, obstructed justice, had a gun on him, and everybody's commenting on how ICE should have reacted in that 15 seconds.
It's interesting. I've been watching some of this the stuff you're talking about, people breaking down that 15 seconds. That 15 seconds was an MSNBC clip that lasted 15 minutes where they continue to show it from every angle and talk about why it was a wrongful killing and all of that. And for the first 13 minutes of that 15 minutes on MSNBC, and as we do, we watch all the different things so we can really get a sense of us not being in a bubble somewhere. So we watch everything. And for the first 13 minutes, they just kept saying he posed no threat. He posed no threat. They said he approached them with a gun. There was no gun. There was no gun. And they mentioned no gun and no threat about 20 times. And then as they got to the last 90 seconds of the video, they were like, and then you can see that one of the officers took the gun off of him. And I was like, it's the first time you've mentioned a gun. So if I decided on that YouTube clip that I was watching not to watch the last 90 seconds and just watch the first 13 minutes, I would never have known that the guy even had a gun. The amount of misinformation that is going out right now about this story is staggering. By the way, it's okay that it's in dispute. It's okay that you want to review the footage, and it's okay you want to see what happened. Here's what we do know. And, as they say in A Few Good Men, here are the facts, and they are undisputed. There's a guy who was interrupting law enforcement. He had a gun on him, whether he was a gun enthusiast, as people said later, or whatever. Doesn't matter. He had a gun on him. Okay, it's legal to have a gun on you. He had a permit for it and everything else. But while he had that gun strapped to his hip, he decided to A, obstruct officers, B, go ahead and drive himself on foot, not drive, like move himself towards the officers. Sure, he was helping someone up. Okay, fine. But he did this with a physical move towards the officers. And in at least one of the videos that I saw, from one of the angles that I saw, it looked like the gun was in his hand at a certain point. Now, with deep fakes and everything else, I'm not going to say I know for certain, and we're still in the middle of the conversation. But what I do know is, if you think that going towards law enforcement that is trying to do their job with a gun on you while you are actively protesting what they're doing by force, and you think there are going to be no repercussions, I don't know what to say to you. You've misunderstood the way the world works. You've misunderstood the way law enforcement works. You've misunderstood the laws that are included with how they are meant to defend themselves and everything else that goes with it. This may be tragic because a person lost their life, but it also may be totally justified. And from everything that I've seen so far, sometimes it's best not to put yourself in a position.
I think it's always best to not put yourself in a position like that, Mend. And it would have taken 15 seconds for him to put his hands up, turn around, be handcuffed, and not be dead.
There's a whole bunch of things with this one. One is the guy, not that this, gets you killed, but he was a cross-dressing trans lunatic who should not have been on the streets impeding ICE.
I didn't even know that. Is that documented?
I think you might be getting mixed up with the other guy.
No, I know who the other guy is. The other guy's calling for armed violence. He's the head of Antifa in Minneapolis, came out and said, we need to get our guns. We need to start shooting these MFers. That's another guy. This guy, this medic, here's what gets me. With every single police shooting, when it goes one way, unarmed man was shot. This time, did they say armed individual shot by ICE? Or do they say a medic that was on scene doing independent journalism, or whatever they're calling it, was assassinated, killed by ICE guys? I watched that video. Not that I'm a video expert. The guy did have a 6-hour 9mm, which is a very trigger-happy gun on him. It appears that when the agent saw it and grabbed it from him, it may have misfired. It may have fired a shot into the ground. The suspect did grab something out of his hip, and they already took one gun off of him. And we're talking about everything in the matter of a few seconds. So they disarmed him. They saw that he had a gun. They yelled out. You hear them yelling, gun, gun, gun. They grab the gun. Then his hand goes to his hip, and he grabs what appears to be one of his clips. But I think the officers thought that was a secondary weapon. They already had a weapon on this guy. This guy was violent. He was combative, and now he's dead. It was preventable. He could have stayed at home. He could have gone to work. He could have taken care of the people at the VA hospital where he worked, but he decided to put himself in harm's way, and the agents that are there to arrest violent criminals put their lives at risk by alerting these violent criminals that the agents are coming, and now he's dead. The whole thing's preventable. It was avoidable. Had Minneapolis police protected the ICE agents on the ground as they are supposed to, these people would never come in contact with ICE. But they're not doing that.
You're raising a great point, by the way, because what you're referring to is the fact that this was a no-go zone, right? So for police. So when you look at the video, again, this is everybody looking at a video like we're on the ground, okay? And men, when you look originally at the video, you see a bunch of people wearing the reflector jackets, right? Now, any normal person, nobody's talking about this, that watches that video would think, oh, they must be employees of the state or something. No, those were people part of the signal chat to agitate and obstruct justice. That's who was wearing those yellow reflector jackets. Okay, this wasn't nighttime in a dark area. These are people that literally rule the streets because the police refused to go there. So I'm happy you brought that up.
We're going to come back to this. It's cause and effect. Had Minneapolis Police Department worked with ICE to transfer violent criminals from their jails that were arrested doing crimes to go straight into ICE custody and be deported, ICE would not be on those streets. This is not, you hear Tampon Tim saying, get out of here and everything will calm down. That's not the way it works. Sorry. Rapists would be saying the same thing. Get out of here and everything will be calmed down. No, your people are breaking the laws. It's not the job of ICE to get out of town. It is your job to protect your citizens by working with ICE to get these violent criminals off your streets. They are conflating. They are mixing up who the actual victims are, Trump put it out today, and I retruthed it with a slight modification. Sanctuary cities should be providing sanctuary to U.S. citizens, to the innocent U.S. citizens, not to violent criminals. A sanctuary city should be a city that is safe for American citizens. This entire concept of making sanctuary cities for violent criminals flies in the face of everything that's reasonable, rational, and that would enable a thriving society. If you don't have that, you're not going to have a thriving society. We're going to wind up like Raqqa in Iraq, where everybody has a gun and they're shooting each other. Is that what we want?
I also want to point out, look, as someone who has worked with law enforcement and was in the military and all of that, as I know you were as well, Mend, you have to think of this in tactical terms. Maybe this is cold, but it is what it is. These are agents that are in a fluid and chaotic environment, right? They're surrounded by crowds, people screaming, wearing these vests you're talking about, making noise. They're agitating deliberately. This particular guy flagging traffic through as if he actually worked on the scene, as if he was a law enforcement.
Well, it looked like that, right?
Of course,
how come nobody's talking about that? It actually, to any normal
because
observer,
that would vilify him, because
right,
that would make him part of the problem. But the point is that with all this going on, cops on the scene, cops and other law enforcement officers are having to make split-second decisions. And if someone with a firearm, even if it's holstered, even moves towards officers, they have to at least be aware of what's going on, and it is reasonable, and this is what's important, for them to interpret it as a threat to life. Now, more than that, even the lead prosecutor who is interested in Minnesota, I'm talking about, who's interested in vilifying these officers, said this: if law enforcement is approached with a guy with a gun, the likelihood of force will be legally justified is high. It's higher, right? It's just basic self-defense doctrine. Someone walks up to you in an aggressive manner, trying to disturb what you're doing, and he has a gun on his hip. You are more aware than if he just comes up to you with his fists.
I want to ask you both a question, because you're more of a gun aficionados than I am. Okay, so man, let's say you did have a concealed permit. Golan, same question goes to you. Would you be carrying 2 magazines on you? And I'm just asking this as an honest question. Like, would you have 2 backup magazines, unless you were going to like a synagogue to protect it or a church to protect it on a Friday night?
The 2 magazines is not the big deal. It's showing up to a ICE, you're going to impact
to a law enforcement, right?
And you're there with a Sig Sauer, which has an hairpin trigger with no safety. This gun has no safety on it. So this guy, this deranged lunatic, showed up at this event with a loaded weapon with no safety. and he got into a violent confrontation with ICE officers. How it started, that doesn't matter. I mean, how it started is him showing up there. Like, I love the way
Well, that's why
NSM
Bessent had the best response. Bessent's answer, when he was talking to Jonathan Carl, and I posted this on True Social, Bessent had the best answer. He's like, I've been a ton of protests. And he's like, oh, he said to Jonathan Carl, have you ever been to a protest? And he's like, well, I have. I brought a billboard, not a gun.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
I thought that was, and Golan, here is where the major, by the way, sorry, if the two magazine, I'm just not used to that.
No, but can I add one thing to this too?
Yeah.
This is something people are dancing around, but it kind of actually matters. This wasn't just a gun. This wasn't a guy who had like a Glock on him or even a SIG. This was a heavily modified handgun, and that's a different thing. When someone approaches you like with a concealed carry permit, usually that means my brother has a concealed carry permit. When I'm in Israel, I sometimes have one as well. You have a gun on your hip, right? Or I used to anyway when I was there. You have a gun on your hip, and gun on your hip is generally something that you are using for protection. You have it there as something that is an everyday item. This thing had aftermarket modifications. It had like an extended magazine and a weapon mounted light that's like a trigger, not a trigger light, excuse me, a target light, and a modified trigger and slide components and all sorts of other stuff on it. Look, it's not an illegal thing to have, but that's not something that you're carrying around for rapid engagement. That's not something you're carrying around for personal defense. It's something that is like, it's a different thing. It's a red flag. And so on top of everything else, when they yanked that gun away from him, and even if he was reaching for a magazine or reaching for his phone to film the encounter or whatever jerky movement he was making, which is again, according to the witnesses, this is not, I wasn't there, I didn't see it, but you can see it on the video that there's a move he's making after they say gun, and the gun is taken away from him. And the only thing you should be doing at that point is putting your hands in the air.
Yeah.
Putting your hands in the air.
He would not have been dead. Final thoughts on that, man?
I did not hear that this gun was modified. That's
man, you should see the picture of it. It looks like something out of Call of Duty.
But I do know that Sig Sauer is facing 100 lawsuits for this particular weapon for it unintentionally discharging, so it shoots on its own most of the time while it was still in the holster. So they're facing 100 lawsuits right now from different entities because that weapon has been known to discharge. And when you see the video of the cop holding it, it does appear the guy's running away. Again, all of this happened in split seconds. There was a confrontation. The guy went for his gun. I don't even think the officer pulled it out of his waist, but you could fact check me on that one. I might be wrong, but I saw his left arm come up with something, and the officer may have gotten the pistol from his right side, and this may be clip that he grabbed from his left side, but he did grab something and he was starting to raise his arm with it, and that's when he was killed. So I don't know, this gun may have been modified, but even without it being modified, the gun itself is a problem. It's a gun that you would take to target practice. It's a gun.
It is important, and not enough people are talking about it. I will say honestly, it is something that it takes the situation. If you are assessing in a split second, it takes it from armed citizen to potential active threat. It just does visually.
Okay, like you said the other day with Guy, I'm the audience, so use me as an example of a non-gun owner. Okay.
Yeah.
When I looked at that thing, I was like, that's not a really normal looking gun. And I'm like adding the two magazines to it. It looked like it had a like a little.
I'm going to do something because just dispel some stuff right now. There's something called the MKs. An MK is a device that you could put a regular pistol into. It gives it a bump stock, or not a bump stock, a stock. So a foldable stock. It looks like it takes a handgun, and it makes it look like a mini machine gun, and it has extra clip holders. So this thing literally looks like something coming out of a video game. Doesn't enhance the lethality of that gun. I mean, it might help you aim a little bit better, but in general.
No, my point though is to a normal person watching that video, they should be, that everybody that's so always anti-Second Amendment, they should be looking at that gun going, who me being pro-First Amendment, even though I don't own a gun because I don't own a gun. I'm looking at that objectively saying that doesn't just look like a gun, even though, again, don't be a jackass.
Looks can be deceiving. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Well, hey, wait, Can I say one more thing, just because I want our audience to understand this? Because Mend isn't wrong that there are certain ways you can make something easier to hold or easier to rest against your shoulder or whatever. Lethality comes from caliber, comes from ammunition, doesn't come from accessories. So a 9mm fired from a stock pistol or fired from a modified pistol, the same damage, right?
Correct.
But, and this is where it's important, you're talking about capacity, you're talking about speed, and you're talking about sustained threat. So if you have an extended magazine, for instance, it doesn't make the bullets themselves deadlier, but it makes the shooter capable of firing more rounds without pausing. It makes
No, but
a
that's not
potential
my point.
casualty count higher.
That's not my point. What
No,
I'm
but wait,
saying
but
is,
I understand it's not your point, but I'm saying the cops had to assess the situation, and that has to be part of the equation.
oh no,
Sorry,
100.
continue, Judah.
You're both 100% right. What I'm simply saying is I love that the left, who's always talking about assault weapons and every type of gun, is not horrified, obviously, because they can't be, by the way this weapon looked, regardless of,
And that, I hear what you're saying.
regardless of anything. Me as the normal viewer defending ICE and will defend ICE is looking at this going, it's not a gun. He literally, it's like I'm watching RoboCop.
But what's scary with that is that is the anti-gun leftist way of viewing things throughout our entire Second Amendment debates. So I want to say, when you look at a weapon, forget about the way it looks, because they make guns look really scary, and it's the same shotgun. It shoots the same 12 gauge, but one of them has like this kind of metal cage around it, and it's octagon shaped, and it looks so brutal and great and cool, in my opinion. But it really doesn't change anything about the gun. And then you have the Democrats and the idiot lawmakers who don't understand that there is no such thing as an assault weapon. There's no criteria for an assault weapon. There's rifles, there's pistols, there's semi-automatic weapons, and fully automatic weapons. That's it. That's where you got.
Can I
when
to
they
your,
go,
to your
assault weapons, we're going to ban assault weapons. What are you talking about? I'll tell you what they're talking about. They get to then pick and choose. And also
Right,
in
exactly.
America, it's important to note, in America, there are a lot more people killed with knives and pistols than there are with AR-style rifles. But they always go after the rifles. Why is that?
I don't even think there's a competition of how close it is. I do want to move on, guys.
Wait. I just want to say, to your point, Judah, that there is a hypocrisy on the left when it comes to this, where you think about what, like the Kyle Rittenhouse story, this is basically the flip side, right? This is the lefty guy with a gun going in, self-defense, legal carry, all this stuff. And it's the same story Kyle has. The only difference is who got shot in this particular case. But here they're like, Second Amendment, everything's fine. He was there to defend himself. It was legal. It was concealed.
Well,
Suddenly,
there's also
all the stuff
another
that they
major
vilified
difference.
Kyle
I was going to
for.
say that.
Yeah,
Go, Judah.
Go on. There's also another major difference, and
Yeah.
I think maybe we should edit that part out, because the major difference is this guy actually attacked law enforcement.
No. Don't edit it out, because the point remains the same. For the left, the hypocrisy of the left is it doesn't matter. And that's my point.
Right.
Listen, to the left, nothing matters. Okay. So to the left, the fact go on that Tim Walz and Frey were actually calling for this to happen, that he's on a signal chat with over 1,000 people who are literally vigilantes, and in this case, armed vigilantes, who have taken over city streets, city blocks, areas, whole areas of Minnesota. None of it matters. So having like this type of argument with anybody on the left, there is no argument to be had. There's no equivalent, because they wake up every day, a leftist, and go, how will I think today about this? Which way the wind blows today? Is my opinion going to be shaped on this? Not about Men's point about how about a sanctuary city for Americans? Forget about the sanctuary city. But
I'm
again,
actually going to talk to the mayor of Huntington Beach and ask them to declare that Huntington Beach is a sanctuary city for Americans, where American parents will feel safe and confident knowing that their children are protected from violent illegal aliens.
I think that's a great idea. But go on. I want to get back to this, though, about Walz and Frey. This is their fault. This is absolutely their fault. Tim Walz has been calling for this daily. He was calling for people to stand up to ICE. And other leaders in the Democrat Party have been doing the same thing. So this is what happened. As Men says, cause and effect. If you don't want your citizens getting killed by ICE for attacking law enforcement, stop telling them to go out and do it.
There's no question. This is 100% at his feet and at Frey's feet as well. This is something that he's not just been calling for. He's been explicit. Both of them have been explicit with how they think this should be like the next civil war. Like this is the time for us to have, our stand against the federal government. Everything that they've said has absolutely been part of this. This didn't emerge out of thin air. This is deliberate escalation through leadership rhetoric by what's his name, Jacob Frey and Tim Walz. And the number of times they have called federal immigration agents illegitimate, they've called the federal government un-American, they've called law enforcement in general hostile to their communities. I mean, they're basically doing what they did in Gaza, where they take these kids and they tell them over and over again, this is the truth. And they lie to them over and over again until they hate a certain people. And this is leaders here who have also been very helpful in terms of lining the pocketbooks of the citizens of Minnesota, telling them, now you know you can trust me. I hooked you up with billions of dollars. And now your next task is go out and stop this invasion. Federal agents are racially profiling and destabilizing neighborhoods and et cetera, et cetera. All the stuff that they're shouting, you're not going to get calm protests out there. You're going to get people thinking it's my duty to stop them by any means necessary.
Well said, Amanda. I want to bring up an interesting point because, it's very interesting because you saw a lot of so-called conservative commentators or people on X, sort of crapping on ICE or saying, let's get out of Minnesota. The three of us here are not saying that. None of us are saying anything anti-ICE. We're not saying Trump should pull ICE out of Minnesota. We're just trying to dissect the situation. And obviously, none of us think the fault is with ICE. And I'm very happy now that Trump is bringing in Homan. A lot of people got really upset with me on True Social when I said Kristi Noem is one of the worst messengers. And we all had that show about that. And we agreed with each other. Yeah. Get her the hell out. Because it goes to your point, man, what you always say. And of all the points you've said to me, men, that have resonated the most, if you can't explain something in 15 seconds, you've absolutely lost the narrative. Okay. And so Bessent, in less than 6 seconds, had the narrative out there that the narrative should have been what he said. The narrative should have been, why are you going to simply, why would you go to law enforcement with a gun and be an agitator? Just simple messaging, man. And she lost it. She lost it a long time ago. And I'm happy Homan's going in.
Yeah. I mean, let's see. I don't think the media is going to give Homan a pass on any of this. They're going to beat him up.
Oh, no.
Like everything else. And Homan comes across a little tough, and Christine has that female touch, which is a little softer, but
not in her case.
Let's see what happens. I don't think there's any way for this administration to talk their way out of this. They're just going to have to continue doing what they're doing. And I think what he should be doing actually is ratcheting up the pressure. You go maximum pressure. You say, oh, we have 15,000 agents there and you guys are riling up your constituents to attack ICE. Next week, we're sending in 30,000 and then it's going to go to 60,000 until you guys comply with us. And the way to make it end, and you buy billboards in Minnesota and you say, if you want ICE out, renounce your sanctuary city policies and have law enforcement work with ICE to deport criminals.
Well, Trump did say that. That was the
simple.
First thing. That was the first thing Trump said this morning, Golan. But again, going back to what I'm talking about is this. We all knew, we got lucky over the summer in Los Angeles with ICE. Right? The Trump administration got really lucky as far as messaging went. They were able to control the situation. They were able to control the narrative of the situation extremely well. And we're talking about in California when we saw how well organized this was. So knowing this, Golan, knowing what a potential powder keg this could have been for months ahead of time, these people should have been on podcasts. They should have been anywhere they can talking about what is going on, that why is this not going on in other states, like even in some blue states that are handing over, as men just said, the illegal immigrants. They should have been explicitly talking about this and getting on any show. JD Vance, if you are friends with Joe Rogan, get on his show for 3 hours and be useful. Obviously, Tucker, who hates Republicans at this point, maybe a harder get, even though you're friends. But this is something they should have been messaging for months on.
Look, I agree with you on one hand, and I also have a problem with it on the other hand, which is, look, if you hire people whose job it is to just do messaging, I'm not saying you take the vice president or someone like that. Maybe the vice president, but I'm saying someone whose job it is just do that, and you have them waste their time going on all the shows and explaining everything ahead of time and talking about all this stuff. I suppose I have a feeling it would just end up in the same boat you're in now. Think about what happened. Bessent came out, as you love to point out. He said some amazing stuff. That was a very simple explanation that basically it was kind of echoing the federal narrative, but done in a very simple, straightforward way. In just a handful of seconds, he was able to explain what happened and why it was a bad idea to bring a firearm to a protest and all the rest. All that's happened since then is scathing comments and social media challenges and people coming at sharp criticism coming from opponents and all this other stuff. It's just a snowball of stuff. Nobody cares what the truth is. Nobody cares what the message is. What they care is echoing the narrative. So you can have people go on these sites. This isn't fun, Trump being interviewed about BS in order to get the election going stuff, where you're just pushing the status. This is law enforcement trying to explain what they're going to do or trying to explain what's happening. People don't listen to that stuff. People will click
like
away.
I said, this is like when Rogan got on his show and started talking about the farmers being arrested in that instant, or the gardeners being arrested and all that stuff. That instant, they should listen. We all witnessed what happened in 2020, how that narrative went. We all witnessed it, every single one of us. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about literally the second you lost Rogan, you had to realize you were going to lose every other podcaster.
But they never really had Rogan. As you point out on a regular basis, this is a Bernie bro who had some fun screwing around with Trump and then endorsing Trump because Kamala was just so disgusting and odious that nobody wanted her in office.
So you get on his show and you dispute the second he gets on with his narrative, that's a false narrative. Just like the 5-year-old kid.
Just like Douglas Murray did when he went on his show. Worked out great. I think that maybe it's a waste of time. I think that maybe you have such an infrastructure of the media and the pod bros and the people who are paid off by Qatar and everybody else who are going to continue saying all of this stuff anyway, that you say what you can from the White House press room, move it to 5 o'clock so at least it's in everybody's eyeballs as we all agree with. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to change anything.
I think are you the person that disagreed with me on Truth Social?
Because no, I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you in theory, but I don't agree with you in practice.
Well, I got something.
Here you go. Let Mr. Messaging men can save the day here. Maybe.
Deputy AG Todd Blanche had the following statement: "We deport 10 times as many individuals, illegal aliens, out of Texas than they do out of Minneapolis." But you hear nothing of this stuff going on in Texas.
Well, that's what I was saying.
You don't have any of the same problems in Texas, but 10 times the number.
And Miami and Florida.
Texas, there's a lot of places. But why don't we hear about that? There's a couple of clear reasons. One is, in those states, they don't have sanctuary city policies. So local law enforcement works with ICE to protect the local community while transporting or delivering illegal aliens to ICE to be deported out of the country. So they're working hand in hand. You don't see any of the chaos that's ensuing. But in Minneapolis, the elected leaders are calling ICE Gestapo, and they're saying, go out and get in their face. It's actually illegal to impede the investigation. Most of these times, they're looking for these child rapist psychopaths. So it's actually a dangerous, volatile situation. And they have these cross-dressing lunatics getting in the way, literally getting in the way of ICE agents, law enforcement, doing their jobs. So we see a lot more coming out of Minneapolis, a lot more people being deported out of Texas than Minneapolis, but you're seeing all this chaos happening in Minneapolis. It's that simple.
I just want to remind you both of something before we move on a little bit about something. By the way, I posted this on Truth yesterday. The left really has a fixation with Nazis and the Holocaust. It's like the biggest case of projection I've ever seen. That's like all they ever refer to is that you're Hitler, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, you're a Gestapo, you're the brown shirts, everything. It's like everything they want to be, they project on everything else going on. But the thing I wanted to say is, to what's obvious to us, let's take the three of us out of the equation. There is a group of independents in this country who see, just constantly through their screens, the messaging that's going on. So obviously we're not talking to the leftists in the so-called independents go on. But you got to remember, there are a lot of people out there that when they see Kristi Noem talk, they're not getting it from Kristi Noem. I got to be honest. They're just not. If I'm not getting it from her, Lord knows they're not. And I'm using
I don't disagree with you that her messaging game is off. Okay. But we also know that, as I've mentioned on the show a handful of times, that it didn't matter how many times we had people talk about it on podcasts or on the news or on Bill Maher or anywhere else, that the great people on both sides hoax was a hoax. And Biden still, up until the time he left office, was like, the whole reason I ran was because he said that. And people still believe it wholeheartedly. Even people on the Republican side of the aisle believed it at a certain point because it was repeated. There you go. Men raised his hand
And
because it was
I
repeated
defended
so
you on
often.
Friday, by the way, man.
I
Yeah.
heard that.
No.
It was
yeah.
impossible to find the clip at the time. When I heard Scott Adams, the guy who just died, the cartoonist died, talking about it, I thought he was nuts because I liked Scott Adams. I'm like, what are you talking about? Come on. That's everywhere. And then I started looking for it, and you could not find the video clip online. Major organizations like Google and everyone else buried it. You could, I looked, and I'm
But that's
good
what
at
I'm saying.
researching.
The
No, but hold on. Can I
infrastructure
tell you the
is
major
in
difference?
I was
place
able to
for
find the
this.
transcript. The only thing I was able to find was a transcript, and I read it, and I was like, whoa, that's not
It's a
true.
mind
And then
blow.
later the videos came out. People
Go
started
on, I
using
just
it.
wanted to
What's
tell
the
you the
difference,
major
dude? All right,
difference.
tell me the major difference.
The major difference is this: we didn't have X at the time. Okay, we didn't have X at the time, and we didn't have a bunch of independent. Remember, without Nick Shirley, right? That's his name. I always get it confused. Nick Shirley, Minnesota fraud scheme, doesn't get highlighted. There's so many things that would not have gotten highlighted without, independent journalists on X right now. So it is a bit of a difference between pre-Elon Musk buying Twitter and now. That's all I'll say, is that there are other ways of getting messaging out there that break the legacy and mainstream media that I don't think are being utilized in the best way possible.
That I agree with. Look, I have another question when it comes to messaging, which is, everybody that I've heard talk about what a tragedy this is, again, not disputing whether it's a tragedy or not. I'm just saying everyone from a certain side of the aisle is, or from a certain ideology, is saying how tragic it is. And not one person has mentioned that it is actually illegal to physically block officers, to interfere with arrests, to obstruct federal operations, to threaten, surround law enforcement. We watch these people in their cars being like, they're coming around the corner, I'm following them, all this stuff. And it's also illegal to refuse lawful orders to disperse. All of those things are criminal conduct. So, I mean, I guess at a certain point, instead of waiting until they approach and then doing something about it, maybe get a whole faction of cops out there, or law enforcement or whatever it might be, to just start throwing people into a paddy wagon.
Listen,
Because I don't understand why they're allowed to continue flagging cars down and doing
because
all
there's
sorts
no
of other
police.
stuff.
There's no police on the street. One of my favorite things was I used to go to, a lot of times when I was younger, to the Comedy Cellar, which is on Bleecker, or Cafe Wa, which was on Bleecker. Man, you remember that area. And there was the one street where they would where they shot that movie, Serpico. And there was a hidden paddy wagon in there. And I remember getting there, like you'd get to the village at like 7:00 at night, and like there was one person in the paddy wagon. And I remember thinking to myself, man, he's got a long wait till they fill up the rest of that paddy wagon. And you'd walk back at 11, it was still there. Finally, 1 a.m, they filled it up and it would go. But you're 100% right. Get paddy wagons out there. You touch an officer, against the law. You touch a fence at a protest, you have broken the protest rules.
If
and people
you
just need to
stand
remember
in
this.
front of an officer that is trying to go forward, that is criminal conduct, period. That you don't have to wait for physical contact. If you're interfering with arrests, even if that means you're not protesting, and there is a difference between these things are actually important distinctions. Speaking, assembling, chanting, marching with permits, by the way. But the other stuff is beyond that. And there's no reason why anybody, again, it's like the Chris Rock story, right? You get pulled over, the cop comes up to your car, you got two options. You can either be a dick about it, and then you're asking for trouble, and who knows what might happen. Or you can, yes, sir, no, sir, thank you, sir, hand them everything they ask for, wait quietly until they come back, and then drive away. Because they're cops, not because you have to be afraid, not because you're a minority, and not because you're a Jew, not because you're black or anything else. Just because we're in a society here.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody's ever gotten pulled over by a trooper, like man, in like Jersey with the Garden State Troopers at night. If you see that light that flashes, you're like, oh God. And then they come and they are dressed like troopers, and you're like, they're like, you know what you did? And you're like, yes, I was speeding. You know what I mean? Like that.
Whatever you say,
Never
man.
say that. Never say that.
I'm
And
kidding
I've run away
around, but
from those cops many
I'm kid,
times.
I'm kidding around, but you're scared to death of them. I want to move on though quickly to this Ilhan Omar thing and really quickly, men, she's now worth 44.
It goes up by the day. Those Somali scammers keep on lining her pockets. Look, you know what's crazy is that I'm seeing some people on the left saying that the entire talk about Somali scamming Minnesota taxpayers is just
racist.
right-wing propaganda. And I'm like, you guys just won't believe anything. You literally, your daughters are being raped and beheaded by these insane illegal aliens. You don't come out and say a word. The Somalis are raping you and ripping you off blind. Not a word. There's nothing that they'll believe if it comes from or it just goes against their narrative. So I don't even know why we're still engaging, which is where society breaks down. Like the old Democrat versus Republican, you could see merit in both cases. You would see them debate it out. And if somebody had better policies, they would win. Now it's not. It doesn't matter what you say. You could say you could say that fraud and tax fraud is bad for the country. And they'll say right-wing propaganda. And you're like, oh, okay, you guys are just lunatics.
Yeah.
Right. So now go on.
And by the way, let's mitigate that response. Okay. Here you go. She's a career politician at this point. Most of her adult life has been spent in public office since she came to the States. She's mostly worked in nonprofit circles, activism, all that kind of nonsense. So now she's worth tens of millions of dollars. So forget it. I'm not saying she did anything. I'm taking out of the equation robbing a bank, Ponzi schemes, defrauding, tax schemes, all that. I'll take it all out. But there's a legitimate question that can be asked that even the crazies on the left that are unwilling to see reality can at least say, can you explain it? Because it doesn't really make sense. Something doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't jive. Yeah. So I don't think you have to go conspiracy to say, can we at least ask what the hell's going on here?
Remember Tim Walz, the Diary of Anne Frank, Tim Walz, his whole being proud was the fact that he didn't have a bank account go on. So you would think there would be a little intellectual curiosity. Obviously, there's not, because she's a protected class in many ways. But this Tim Walz thing of comparing Somali children to Anne Frank got the Holocaust Museum. I have never seen really the Holocaust Museum put out such a condemning statement towards anything. Usually they stay sort of neutral. They went after Tim Walz on this, comparing the Somali. They're going to one day write a diary about these Somali children.
The guy is disgusting. I just want to be so brutal because he's such a moron. He's such I'm trying to say words that we're allowed to say on the air. He's such a moral cesspool. Is that fair? The idea that he's going to take any kind of
human sewage.
Thank you. Column of human sewage. It's what you just said a moment ago. Jude, I think you said it, right? They're obsessed with the Holocaust. It's the only thing they can pull out of their arsenal. The only way they can get a rise out of people is by lying about who's Gestapo, is by lying about jackbooted thugs. It's about lying about brown shirts. It's about lying about Anne Frank. It's about lying about everything. Nazis and gender. They use the word Nazi on a regular basis. They use the word Hitler on a regular basis. Forget that they don't know their history. I'm going to assume they do know their history and that they don't care that what they're saying is ahistorical. These are people that you don't get to invoke the Holocaust every time you want emotional leverage. You pieces of garbage.
Yeah, they invoked the Holocaust more than survivors ever did. Well, survivors came to this country and wanted them, did their best to move on. Obviously, the never forget type of thing. But you'd never really hear a survivor call anybody a Nazi, other than actual Nazis.
Well, because it diminishes the whole enterprise.
Yeah. And I want to move on, though, to this article I sent you, because this is something we're very passionate about, because, we're always, somebody called me, I don't know if you saw this post, I was posting about something with ICE, and somebody called me somebody called me a Zionist shill or something like that, man. And I was like, I was talking about ICE. I don't know how my Zionism got into that, but we often talk on this show about the slaughtering of Christians across the world. And it's something that is extremely important to us because we are frightened by it and terrified that nobody talks about it and rarely is anything done by it. But, and you hear Tucker talk about Israel quite often with the Christians, right? That the hostility that Israel has towards Christians, well, they've only grown exponentially since the birth of Israel. And Please tell us the list, if you don't mind.
I will, but first I want to go back to Tucker and Israel and Christians for a minute. If there are two parties and one party is benevolent, welcoming, and caring, and the other party has a history of beheading your people, and when you're going to publicly talk about these two parties, what we see is a lot of the Christians and Greek Orthodox and all these people in the Holy Land that have thriving lives in the Middle East. It's the only place that they are protected. And you see them come out and talk badly about Israel and positively about the Palestinian Authority, because the Palestinian Authority is the ones that have the power to chop their heads off or kill their children. And the Israelis never do that. So it's this weird phenomenon that you only see there because the numbers tell a different story. The communities, the Christian and Greek Orthodox and all the other non-Jewish communities thrive in Israel, and they languish and die out everywhere else in the Middle East.
By the way, just so you put to your point before you go on, just, Tucker on record the other day saying Qatar has the most Christians of anybody in the Middle East. And I'm like,
It's the
I want to see
funniest,
them.
funniest thing. No, but it's true. I mean, they're all
It is
all
true. They're
slaves.
They're
Yeah,
slaves.
they're right. They're right. They have Chris.
It's amazing.
All right, so Tucker loves to talk about Israel and Christians, but North Korea is the worst country in the entire world for Christians, followed by Somalia, Yemen, Sudan, Eritrea, Syria, Nigeria, Pakistan, Libya, and rounding it off with Iran.
You
Although-
Zionist shill.
Yeah.
You did not bring up Israel. How dare you?
I know. So I hope they send me my $7,000 check, but this is the list, and it comes from a Christian organization called Open Doors COS or something like that, and they track Open Doors. They track the world with the countries that have that treat Christians the worst throughout anywhere, and this is the top 10 list. So sadly, Israel did not make that list, but all the other countries besides North Korea have something in common. I don't know what it is. What do you think it is? Somalia, Yemen, Sudan, Eritrea, Syria, Nigeria, Pakistan, Libya, and Iran.
We know it's not Jews.
It's not the Jews. Can't be.
We know it's not Jews. I think the
By
word
the
starts
way,
with an N.
Yeah. By the way, just to go back to Tucker's claim, because I think it's one of the dumber claims that he's made because it's so easily refuted, even though no one seems to be refuting it because everyone just kind of buys whatever is shoved down their throat like a goose being stuffed for Christmas. But in Qatar, where the Christian slaves are, he was talking about how there's so many churches, and then but if you do 1 second of research, you find out that there's basically one religious complex in Doha that has a bunch of affiliated churches within it. And so you can say that there's a Catholic church, there's an interdenominational Christian church, the Church of the Epiphanies, and this church, that church. They're all actually in one complex, and they're just named different things.
You mean they're concentrated? They're concentratedly put into one camp in Qatar, as a group. When has that happened before?
Yeah,
of a group
weird
of people being put in one place.
By the way, if you mention Christianity outside of that complex, you can be severely punished by the government and maybe even put to death. But go Tucker, go. You bought a house recently. Go enjoy yourself. Why don't you go talk about Christ? See what happens.
And also, I need to point this out. Just because we're critical of people, I'm not referring to Tucker right now, because I'm actually overly critical of people like JD Vance, and I am actually critical of people like Kristi Noem. I have no problem with being critical. If people have a problem with that, that's fine. But men, the fact that JD Vance keeps on attacking it is bizarre that he tweets or X's at first it was Sloan, whatever her name was, that nobody's ever heard of, and Laura Loomer. Nobody else. This is where JD Vance takes his stance, is against two women. I'm not going to even bring up the fact that they're Jewish, but two women is who he goes after. Not the guy that's absolutely destroying the base from within, that says, I hate all Republicans deserve to lose, and his nut job brother. The two chicks.
I haven't seen any of that. So what's going on with JD? He's just attacking Laura Loomer for what?
Yeah. Because she's stupidly, and I'm not a fan of her tweet. I'm not defending Laura Loomer's tweet, bringing up the fact that he was at the March for Life, and her whole idiotic tweet was about, this is something we shouldn't be talking about. This is why we lost elections, have lost.
She said that, or he said that?
She said that because of
she
the abortion
said that,
issue.
And then he snapped.
Then he snapped back and he clapped back. And again, I'm not defending Laura Loomer's tweet because I disagree with her. I'm very happy that we have the March for Life. I think it's incredibly important Trump was the first president that's ever gone to the March of Life, not done it for on video, and he wasn't in America at the time. So JD Vance went. I'm happy JD Vance went. Go on. It's not my knock. The knock is, why are you clapping back at these two saying from a bunch of conservative commentators? Like, I thought he was talking about Tucker when I first read it. And I was like, oh, wow. Then I realized he was tagging Laura Loomer.
Did he tag her in his post?
Yeah, he responded to her.
Wow.
It was super lame, and it's the kind of thing that also, there's something about, why are you responding to things that actually, if you don't respond to it, you seem stronger. But the bigger problem for me is there are so many people JD Vance, and JD Vance specifically, should be opening his mouth about, and he's not. So the fact that he decided this is when he was going to put his foot down and take a stand was like, missed your moment, or you deliberately missed your moment. I don't know, but certainly doesn't seem like he is going after who he should be going after, even if I disagree with what Laura Loomer or anyone else had to say.
Yeah, it's just very bizarre to me. And I want to move on, though, a little bit. Men, let me ask you a question. And it's okay if you don't know this. I had to Google it, and I think most people would have to Google this question. When Obama gave his red line to Assad about using chemical weapons, and he did not listen, do you know how many people were killed with the chemical weapons that Assad used?
I don't know how many, but a lot.
1,400.
There was a lot more than that, but okay, they were dropping barrel bombs.
No. Oh, don't get me wrong. Through the years, Assad has killed
like 500,000 Syrians.
Yeah. I'm referring specifically to
that moment,
to his red line. So it was between 1,100 Golan and 1,400 people. 36,000 people.
That was in the single chemical attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was the red line.
The one that was the red line, right? Exactly.
Right. Well, that was the red line. I think it's important to, obviously Assad was a butcher that we put in there, but he was a butcher, and that was the red line. 36,000 people have been at least slaughtered in Iran, not to mention all the Kurds that have been slaughtered in Syria, raped, massacred, men and women, everybody, everything that's going on. And here's the thing. President Trump, who I love on foreign policy. Anybody could read everything I've ever written about him on foreign policy. In fact, he loved the article where I said he's the best foreign policy president of my lifetime. He came out and made those comments that if you do this, if you touch basically one hair on her head, you've crossed my red line. Go on. 36,000 red hairs have been touched. And
look, I think it's far more than 36,000. 36,000 is the real conservative number. I mean, it may be upwards of 100,000 at this point. But yeah, I've ranted about this a lot already, and so I'm not going to go and do it all over again. But I will say, I pray that there is some other plan that I don't know about, and this wasn't simply a blink, as Obama did in Syria, because it does feel like, unlike some other times when he has said, this is what's happening next, he's delivered on it. And I've praised him for that. And when he did not finish the job in Iran the first time, you heard me complain about that. Men disagree with me. That's okay. But it bothered me that Israel once again got the fight to a draw, essentially, because it was clear they were going to rebuild their arsenal. It was clear they were going to get money from China. It was clear they were going to get equipment from North Korea, all the rest. So here, where he very specifically said, if you do X, I is coming. X was done. I has not come. I'm hoping that there's something I'm missing, and this is another one of those times he's going to deliver on his promise.
Guys, do you know how much firepower he's moved into the Middle East?
I do indeed.
How long it takes? Our assets are just getting into position now. So I think to make these jumping to conclusions remarks doesn't help us. Let's wait.
No. Nobody's men. Nobody. I'm not jumping to conclusions.
I said I hope something's coming.
The guy always gets the word. I've never seen him make a statement and then
nobody.
I'm sorry. Wait a second. I'm sorry. Right after they started murdering everybody in the tens of thousands, after Trump had already told them to stop, his next statement was, they promised me they were going to stop. No more executions. It's all good now. We don't have to go in.
That's smoke and mirrors. That's what he's doing.
But that's what I said. I said, I hope this is another one of those times where it's subterfuge and something's coming at the moment. And it's been a while, man. It's not like it was yesterday. It's been a while since that started. He didn't go in. Many of the people in Iran, I talked to some of the people who are in the region. Many of the people in Iran took to the streets specifically because Trump had said that and they knew he was going to have their back.
and I
And many
think
of
that
those
was
people are dead now.
I think that was a bad statement that he made when he said, go out into the streets and help is on the way. Help is on the way, knowing that it takes 2 weeks to get an aircraft carrier from Venezuela over to Iran. And those things are just steaming over there. We have more firepower now in the Persian Gulf than we had before the 12th Day War. Iran is going to get obliterated. The next serious problem for the Middle East, as we've been saying, is Turkey and Qatar. And now it looks like Saudi Arabia is joining in on that, which is a head scratcher. It makes no sense what's going on there with Saudi Arabia, why they would pivot towards the Muslim Brotherhood when they banned the Muslim Brotherhood, when they were leading the fight against the Muslim Brotherhood, and now they're pivoting towards it. I don't understand what's going on there. I do get that a lot of those countries in the Middle East they want to see a weakened Iran. They don't want to see an obliterated Iran. They don't want to see let's just say they don't want to see democracy in Iran. Because if Iran gets democracy, then their people are going to want democracy. So it's a weird time. You're seeing shifting alliances. There's the one thing that is undeniable is that the Muslim Brotherhood is getting stronger. They've gotten a lot stronger over the last 6 months because of Trump's cozying up to Qatar and Turkey. And
not just that, the amount of weapons that China has airmailed to Iran. Let's not forget about the
but that's not Muslim Brotherhood. That's just a whole other wing of this thing.
Well, it's part of the story, though.
Yeah, so China has sent a lot of missiles to Iran, intercontinental ballistic missiles, whatever they're sending over there. From what we hear, it sounds like they still have a launcher capability issue. But Trump's going to take all that out now. He's going to completely defang Iran. He's not going to be able to affect regime change. That's going to be up to the people on the ground. But he's going to go in and take away all their weapons. That's what's coming next. And
how will he do that?
I understood. What's that?
How will he do that?
How would he do that?
How will Trump take away all of their weapons? Are you talking about boots on the ground? Are you talking about missiles from the air? What are you talking about?
Missiles from the air. They're going to bomb the crap out of everything that Iran has built over the last 30, 40, 50 years. So all of they know where this stuff is. It's just buried. And the Ayatollah is hiding too. He'll probably be taken out as well. They can ask the Israelis, how do you get into a bunker? And they're going to say, oh, you drop 35 bunker busters in a row, 3 seconds apart, and you get through anything. And the Americans will do it. They've got the firepower. So Diego Garcia is an island that the Brits owned, and we have an army base there, and that's what we use to fly our B-2 bombers and all our big, heavy bombers over the Middle East. The Brits are talking about giving that back to, I think it's East Mauritius?
Yeah, Mauritius.
Yeah, it's a problem. There are problems. And that's part of it. Actually leads into what Greenland is all about. Why are we going after Greenland? Because when you have an army base on someone else's territory, like Qatar will say, no, we're not going to let you bomb Iran from our territory. It's not ours.
Or use our airspace.
And if you look at what happened you remember Trump was talking about taking back the Panama Canal. We're going to take it back. All that rhetoric. And everybody's like, oh, he's crazy. We can't take it back. How are we going to take it back? Do you know what came out of that? It all faded away. But the Panamanians forced the Chinese to sell all of the land that they bought on the side of the canal, which would have been used as a dual purpose, commercial when in times of peace, but military if there was ever a conflict with Taiwan and the US, and they could just shut down the Panama Canal, which would choke us. So he wasn't really talking about taking the Panama Canal. He was talking about using such overhyped leverage over them that they were so scared we're going to take it back that then they agreed to kick China out of those key strategic positions. And if you're going to talk about an agreement on Greenland, it's going to be the same thing. Greenland is going to give us some of that land, and it's going to be ours. Sovereign U.S. territory. They can't tell us what to do. And I think that's what he's angling for to get away with Greenland. I also don't think the Greenland people want to remain part of
but that's a whole other
thing. But the Danes used sterilization drugs on the people of Greenland not to procreate, not to be able to have offspring. It's a big problem for, your colonial subjects when you forcibly sterilize them, and then you're trying to convince them to stay with you and not vote against you.
You mean like the Muslims did to all of the slaves that they had?
Yep.
As a side note, yeah. Continue.
Yeah, but Golan, I want to get back to this for a second because I understand what Mend is saying 100%. 100% I understand what Mend is saying is getting all your ducks in a row before you actually take action.
Sure. I understand in theory what he's saying. Yes.
I get that. But at the same time, the worst thing in the world you could do is make certain comments that lead the people to believe when you say help is on the way and all the other comments, if you do this or you do this. And then, we saw what happened with, obviously, Iran had shoot to kill orders on
Yeah.
everybody on those streets, shoot to kill.
Look,
And those people
well,
went out.
Mend admitted that what he said was the
Yeah.
wrong message. Mend is Mr. Messaging here. But it really feels like there's a lack of strategy right now. And again, I hope I'm wrong, Mend. I hope that something, there's a coherent end game for all of this. But it feels like this, what did you say? Getting your ducks in a row? It feels like attack expectations were inflated. And I know that the Israelis weighed in. They didn't want the attack to come because they weren't prepared for what the retaliation might be. Great. That's Israel. We're talking about America right now. Okay. You guys know I'm Israeli. I love Israel, all that. You can see my background, but sometimes that's just a suggestion. You got to keep doing stuff. I think delay weakens U.S. credibility, especially for those on the ground who were there specifically because they knew that Trump had promised them something. And last time he promised it, day 60 was the deadline. 61, there was an attack, right? So I can see that this is maybe through JD Vance, the attempt at diplomacy, or maybe, the advisors are pushing back, or maybe other countries are asking to chill out, or whatever it is. But the bottom line is he's not doing what he said he was going to do. And if he's going to eventually, great. But there's an article in the Jerusalem Post, I think from this week, that was talking about, is Trump going to stop Khomeini from regime change? Like, is he going to save Khomeini from regime change? And you read the article, and it's an opinion piece, and I don't have it in front of me, but you read the article, and it's quite convincing that right now, him not delivering after saying he was going to do something has put him in a position where people assume America is weaker than it is. His numbers dropped a little bit since that happened, and people on the ground are no longer quite as rah-rah about going after Khomeini anymore because they feel like they've got no one at their back.
So when Trump likes to do these moves, but he likes to have pretty guaranteed results, which is why he ended the 12-day war early, because look, we got in, we took out their stuff, and didn't lose a single soldier, took out all their air defenses, took out a whole bunch of their nuclear program, and we took out a lot of their missiles program. He called it a win. He walked away and he said, look, we could walk away without losing a single U.S. soldier, and we just took out this threat that's been threatening us for decades, and nobody had the balls to do it. He came in and had the balls to do it.
So he was saying not finishing the job to him was a threat? Like, hey, now you see how easily we can do it. Be careful or we'll actually do it?
I think that when he finished that, he figured that they'll have a choice to make. You could continue this knowing that we could smack you around anytime we want, or you could change your ways. And they decided not to change their ways. So now this time that he's coming in, he's bringing in enough firepower to end it, not just go Band-Aid, not just hurt them a little bit. He is going to obliterate, to use Trump's word, obliterate their military capabilities. And I think he's going to take out a whole bunch of top commanders. And then after that, they might go in with some special forces and kidnap some of the bad guys and put them on trial in International Court of Justice or here or somewhere. But that's how it's going to play out. And they needed the time to get this stuff into place. So he should have been, instead of talking to the people about going out and protest, he should have been talking to the regime saying, please don't do this. We don't want to have to do anything. I need assurances that you're not going to hurt the people. All the bluffery that he's good at, and not convincing these innocent people, because my heart breaks. I see these people, these young, what's great about it, not great, but like what's so telling is that these guys that you're seeing and the ones that are getting the videos out, they're normal kids. They're normal young adults. They're normal 30-year-olds, and they just want freedom and they just want to live. And they're not ideologically driven like the regime is. They're just normal. Like there's a huge, we'll call it rebellious, kind of like a teenager rebelling against the parents. There's a huge swath of Iran. I talked to a friend of mine, an Iranian here, a while ago, and she was telling me that most of the Iranians are not Muslim. They want nothing to do with it. They want to go back to Zoroastrianism. They're not interested in this insanity that the regime is pushing. But the regime is very few of people, but they control all the money. They control all the anything that's worth anything in the country, and everybody else is just subjects of their whim. And
Yeah, they control. They control, to quote that song again, go on, all the lawyers, guns, and money. Mm-hmm. And as somebody brought up as David brought up in the rants, we're speculating, but listen, speculation is all you could do after somebody makes a comment. And when you look at X, that's all people are doing is speculating. And I agree, you're right. There's no point in talking about this one day. Not there's no point in talking about this, but there's no point in talking about the speculation go on. We'll either one day wake up and there'll be a plume of smoke in the air, or there won't.
Or they won't. Right.
If there isn't a plume of smoke in the air, that'll be a stain on his foreign policy legacy, as I said the other day. I just wanted to read you, men, the exact thing from JD Vance, so because people were not aware of this. So Laura Loomer went on this whole thing about why is the GOP pushing more abortion messaging in the midterm election, right? About him being at the March of what is it? March of Life. So his response was, the president literally sent the video to the March for Life today and encouraged me to accept their invitation, which I was happy to do. Now, here's the part. It's interesting that some conservative influencers spend all of their time attacking the administration and sowing division, disgracefully, actually. And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm reading that exact quote, and I'm thinking, you're describing Tucker Carlson. You're not describing Laura Loomer. You're literally specifically talking about, I mean, if anybody were to read that quote, not knowing that Laura Loomer sent it, everybody would, that it was a response to Laura Loomer go on, everybody would be like, yeah, good for you, JD. You finally went after Tucker Carlson.
Go ahead, man.
No,
I just wanted to read you the exact quote, man. Just
you know how I feel, man. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
So on the one hand, I do think she's right. You could be pro-life, but you don't have to bring it up before the midterms. I think it's a miscalculation. You already got Roe v. Wade overturned, and now it's up to the states. And if states want to be pro-abortion, that's great. And if the people of the states vote not to, then they don't. And if you don't like the policies in your state, like I hate the policies in my state, and I'm thinking about moving. So those are our options. For him to call her out by name and never call Tucker out by name is telling. It shows you that there's a serious problem. I've come around. There's a problem with JD's
end.
I know. JD's his worldview, his radar for who's right and wrong, for good and bad. And back to those patriarchs that were, came out, because there's the patriarchs of Jerusalem, whatever it is, the head of a couple of churches. He's taking those people's word over all the other denominations and all of the other Christians in Jerusalem that are thriving. And they're saying it's the best place ever. And this is the only place that we could openly practice our faith. No, he's listening to a couple of Palestinian shills that are out there trying to besmirch and badmouth him. And I was alarmed by that when I saw that.
Okay. And go on. The last thing I want to just touch on quickly is because we had this bit. Yeah, I know Mend is
I love it when he comes around like this. I'm really very happy to hear you say that.
I love it when a plan comes together.
Open mind, guys. Open mind.
Listen, and the other day I openly admitted I was pleasantly surprised with Bobby Kennedy Jr. Pleasantly surprised by Bobby Kennedy Jr. I gave him aces for the job he's done. I have zero issues with being wrong about this. But go on, I want to get back to something just very quickly. And I know we've gone a little over time, but you'll edit the episode down. You'll cut most of what Mend had to say out. And I just want to say this. Gratefully, the last body was they recovered the last body out of Gaza. So for people to understand, that means since 2014, Hamas has been holding bodies to negotiate with of Israelis. They're all out.
This is literally, I want to repeat that again. This is literally the first time since 2014, 12 years, that there has not been a hostage in Gaza.
But the bigger point I just wanted to say to you, go on, because we were talking about messaging. I first of all, and BB took off his yellow pin. I was never a fan of that. I was never a fan of what? Of the yellow pin stuff. I was never a fan of bring them home slogan. I always thought it should be let our people go.
We agree on that, but what's wrong with the yellow pin?
It just wasn't. Anyways, fine. I'm not going to debate the yellow pin, but my point, my bigger point is that when, to counter those yellow pins, you wrote, and God bless you for writing a lot of those letters when actors would go, help write a lot of those letters when actors would go and, bloviate with the red pins or whatever pins they were wearing.
The bloody hand pins.
Right, at the Oscars. And all I'm saying is being proactive instead of reactive sometimes is a really good thing. And Republicans, the left are amazing at being proactive. Look at what they're doing right now on the ground. Look at what they've been planning on the ground. This is all coordinated, what's going on in Minnesota. The fact that we are always reactive and not proactive in some form or another is on us. If you know something is going to happen and you're not being proactive about it, that's on us. We lose the messaging, we lose the narrative, and they set it for us. However you want to go about doing that, that's fine. I'm just simply saying that it's been a real failure of being proactive as far as messaging goes. I mean, how many people even realize this sanctuary state stuff or sanctuary city stuff? That all ICE is asking for is for them to release the 1,300, ICE, the 1,300 illegal criminals. Nobody even knows that. That's been lost. For
It is
months, they
kind
could
of
have been
amazing, by the way, and we've said it a bunch of times in the show, but I just want to repeat it in one sentence or two here. It's always shocking to me when I talk to someone who is very aware that ICE is brutalizing everybody in Minnesota or whatever it is they think, and I say, you understand that most of these people are criminals. And that means they were in jail at one time or another. They were detained at one time or another. And all the government is asking, or the federal government is asking for is when you detain someone who turns out to be an illegal, just don't let them out of prison and into the general pop again. Hand them to us and we can take care of it. That way there's no harm, no foul, no fuss, no muss. We get to take this person and get them out of the way because they've already been arrested. And what the sanctuary city people are doing are saying, no, we don't want to hand anyone over to ICE. So even the criminal, they're releasing them and then sending them into the general population. And then we're like, well, now we have to go get them. And in doing so, you, by not doing your job, have put other people in jeopardy. Can you imagine if all these people were just handed over by the sheriff's office or by the local government just to the federal officers? They put them in the paddy wagon, they're done. That's it.
And
But
to
instead, they
men's
had to go through all of this.
And to men's messaging point, those stories could have been told in 20 seconds via TikTok,
Absolutely.
Instagram, and every other video
100% agree.
known to man. So that's what I was referring to about being proactive, whether you're going to get on a podcast or just have these things flashing in front of your eyes on a daily basis with the algorithms. Thank God David's been putting together these amazing YouTube clips for us that do really well. They get 700, 1,000 views. Can you imagine if the United States government put out these clips?
Yeah.
You'd be, and Elon Musk was amplifying it. You're talking about hundreds of millions of views of explaining to people what's been going on. So yes, I do. Sorry?
I mean, we are a top podcast, but if we're getting 700,000 views, the government would get 700 million views. Tune in, guys. Check our stuff.
Yeah. It's 100%. Go on. That's all I was trying to say.
On that point, I agree. I don't think it's necessarily going on podcasts and long form.
You get what I'm saying. I'm simply saying.
The idea of you have this toxic cancer known as social media, right? I wish it didn't exist. I would give up the internet and my iPhone in order to go back to a world that wasn't retarded. Since we do have all of this trash, let's use it. Right? It reminds me of when Romney was running for office and they were like, you want to reform the tax code, but you only pay $1 in taxes. He's like, well, it's not reformed. I'm not an idiot. I'm going to use what's there. And when I'll fix it, I'll fix it. Like, I always thought that was a great answer. Here we have a similar thing. Social media exists. Use the hell out of it. And if that means you manufacture influencers, great. If that means you're putting out there clips and you're having Elon Musk amplify them, great. Why aren't you doing this every day, 100 times a day? I do not understand.
On that note, I want to thank everybody. It's great to see the dude. We will see him again very soon. Golan, great points. And I just encourage everybody to pause when agitated, not react right away. It's okay to take a good friend of ours that's an editor always says he doesn't report on things 72 hours later, which obviously you can't do certain things in real time.
Yeah.
But we've become so reactionary to live events like this. And I bet you DHS really wishes they could take back certain statements they made instead of just going with people like Scott Bessent. I don't care if you give Scott Bessent 7 jobs, okay? He could be the messenger.
Like Rubio.
He could be like Rubio. Just I actually posted it on Truth. They just put Rubio and Bessent in every job as far as messaging goes, because when they talk, they're clear, they're precise, they're accurate, and they're human, okay? If you're
Rubio's
going to
clips
be,
on social media are fire.
messaging without empathy is dead, and nobody wants to hear about it. On that note, I want to thank you both. I want to thank everybody that's been listening, following, and subscribing. Don't forget to subscribe and follow and give us that 5-star review. You can find us everywhere at thedailycheatsheet.com. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you all.